You need to be a properly incorporated nonprofit corporation. That's a specific type of business that exists in the state of South Carolina. And I'm now that we're talking about laws and forms and things, let me take the step here to remind everybody I am not a lawyer. I can't give you legal advice, and the things that I say you should not take as legal advice. If you find yourself in a particularly sticky legal problem, uh, get a lawyer who specializes in nonprofit tax law. I can recommend a couple. There's also, or at least there used to be, the nonprofit legal clinic at the USC Law School that helps folks out with these sorts of things from time to time. So that said, you need to be incorporated as a nonprofit corporation, and that's a very specific kind of legal corporation in the state of South Carolina. It's not LLC, it's not S corp, it's not B corp, it's not any of those kinds of for-profit corporations. So if you've created an entity that is an LLC and you think, oh, well, I can get 501c3 status, you cannot in South Carolina with an LLC. That's not the right kind of corporate form. There's a specific form, and it's called the nonprofit corporation. In order to create one, you've got to have a group of folks, you've got to have a board of directors, you've got to have initial incorporators. There's a 3-page form you've got to fill out with some information, and it's a $25 filing fee with the Secretary of State's office. And that's not the first time you're going to be dealing with the Secretary of State's office, I promise. You also need to have an employer ID number from the IRS. An employer ID number, or EIN, is a lot like a social security number, but it exists for corporations because according to one of our leaders in Washington, corporations are people too. They get social security numbers, in fact. Or rather, they get EIN numbers. They're free to request. It's a website on the IRS website. And when you log into that website, you can create an EIN. It's instantly assigned, and it happens instantaneously. You do not have to pay for it. So if you find something that says, oh, pay 50 bucks and get an EIN, it's a scam. Don't do it. It happens on the IRS website for free. And then you need a 501c3 determination from the IRS. This is a long and complicated process with lots of paperwork and filing fees that are not small. If you want to know more about that process, we've got a webinar that we've recorded on that called Before You Start a Nonprofit, and you can learn what you need to know about that. I go into great detail about the 501c3 process. But if you filed Form 1023, you've gotten a letter back from the IRS that says we recognize you as tax exempt under Section 501c3, then you've got that checked off. But you've got to maintain it, and we'll talk about that in a second. You need to register as a public charity in the state of South Carolina. Well, in whatever state you happen to be in. I'm assuming we're all in South Carolina, and that's a pretty safe bet, I think. But the process is different in every state. And I should note, if you're soliciting funds, if you're soliciting donations in multiple different states, you need to register as a public charity in any state that you are making an effort to solicit funds in. It varies from state to state what the regulations are. It varies from state to state as to who is responsible for that in their state government. In South Carolina, it's the Secretary of State's office. They handle pretty much everything that has to do with nonprofits. And you have to file this annually, and it's a $50 filing fee. You need to have an active and independent board of directors. Now, what does that mean? Your board of directors cannot just be your family and close friends. It's very tempting when people start new nonprofits that they just put their friends and their family members on there. I will tell you from experience that is a recipe for disaster. I have watched organizations. If you argue with your family members now, wait till you're sitting together on a board of directors and see how well that goes. Don't do it. Get folks on this board who are have got experience, who've got interest and dedication to the mission, who can help you fundraise, and they need to be independent from you. Um, and we've got a tool on that called Board Strong if you're looking for board members. I think we've got about 125 people across the state of South Carolina who are looking to serve on nonprofit boards. You may find your next board member on boardstrong.togethersc.org. But you need to have that board of directors, and they need to approve an annual budget. They need to approve a document, a spreadsheet, something that lays out where your revenues are coming from every year and where your expenses are going every year. Funders are going to ask for it. And if you tell them, oh, we don't have a budget, they're not going to write you a check. And you need to file an annual Form 990 tax return to the IRS. You need to do that to maintain your tax exempt status, but funders are often going to ask you for copies of that Form 990 tax return, and you need to be able to supply that to them. Form 990 is the tax return form for tax exempt organizations, which sounds kind of funny, right? Because you're like, well, we're not paying income taxes. Why do we have to file a tax return? Well, you still have to justify that tax exempt status every single year. And so that form, depending on which one you file, is going to ask you what you did with all that money that you didn't pay taxes on. And also that the people who donated to you didn't pay taxes on, right? And so the IRS wants to know what you did and what kind of good you achieved. It's almost a little bit like an annual report. And actually, it is a bit of an opportunity to say, what you've accomplished in the year. But different levels of organizational size determine what form you file. So if your gross receipts in terms of money are less than $50,000 in that year, and that can be the calendar year, or it can be a different fiscal year depending on what you and your board have decided. But during that financial reporting year, if your annual revenue was less than $50,000, you file what's called the e-postcard. And it doesn't ask for any financial information. It just asks you to give the name of your officers, and it's basically a check-in to say, hey, we're still here, don't cancel us, but we're too small to give you the kinds of reports that you would expect from larger organizations. You've got to file that every year, even though you don't have revenue over 50K. But if you're over 50K but less than 200K, then you file Form 990EZ. It does ask for financial information. It does ask for a whole host of other information, but it's not as full in the questions that it asks as the big Form 990. If you've got annual revenue over 200,000 a year, you've got to file the full Form 990. And at that point, you can probably afford an accountant to audit your books and file that for you. But you've got to file any of these, one of these with the IRS every single year. 5.5 months after your year ends, that form is due. And you need to file it with the IRS and with the Secretary of State's office. I'm not sure that you have to file it with the Department of Revenue anymore. I haven't been asked for it by DOR, so you're probably good. Then you also need to file the charitable registration form. And I've said this already, Secretary of State's office, $50 to file that form. Oh, I just remembered. So these Form 990s, you don't pay a fee to the IRS to file them. You can pay a fee to an accountant or a professional filing firm for the 990 and 990EZ, but you should not be paying anyone to file the e-postcard for you. It is so simple, it is so easy, it takes 10 minutes to file. And if you spend $50 or $100 on filing that, you have wasted your money. So there are websites out there that will say, file your Form 990N with us, $50. They're just printing money by taking it from you. Don't do it. Charitable registration form, $50 with the Secretary of State's office. Both of these are due 5.5 months after the end of your financial year. So let's do the math. If your financial year follows the calendar year, that is May 15th. May 15th is when those are due. If you're on a July 1 to June 30th, it's due November 15th. If you're on some other wacky fiscal year like the federal fiscal year, I'm not doing that math for you, but I'm sure you can figure it out. Okay. So here's the big thing. This tax exempt status can be revoked by the IRS. Now, they can revoke it because somebody complained about you and they launched an investigation and, things happen. That's a whole complicated process. I actually haven't heard of it happening. The most common form of revocation of tax exempt status is the automatic revocation. And this occurs if you don't file that Form 990 for 3 years in a row. Their computers are set up to check. And if they find any organizations in their system that have not sent in a 990 for 3 years in a row, they automatically print out a letter revoking your tax status and they mail it to you. It cannot be appealed. It cannot be appealed. If you call the IRS and you say, oh, I'm so sorry, we didn't file, can we fix this? Can we fix this? The answer is no. You cannot appeal it. The only way that you can restore that automatically revoked tax status is to start over. Not really start over, but you've got to file a new Form 1023. And it's probably not going to be the easy form. It's probably going to have to be the full form because at that point, you may have a couple of years of financial information that the IRS is going to want in order to redetermine that tax exempt status. And you have to submit the missing Forms 990. So they're not going to approve a new tax exempt status for you unless you catch up on those forms that were not filed. And you will have to pay the filing fee, and it can take several months. And it is a giant pain in the neck. And it's one that can come from you doing nothing. All you have to do is nothing about this, and your tax exempt status will be automatically revoked. You've got to file some kind of Form 990 every single year. I cannot stress this enough. And so if I'm getting repetitive, it's just because this is a rookie mistake and it is an easily avoided mistake. And I don't want any of you to have to go through the pain of redoing all of this because the forms weren't filed. And the same is true with the charitable registration. It's not as dramatic as the Form 990 and all that, but you still have to file this charitable registration every year. There are some exemptions. You can get an exemption if your annual revenue, there's a whole host of them, but the two that are most likely to apply to 501c3s is that your annual revenue is less than $25,000 and you're not paying any professional fundraiser more than, I think, $600 in a year. Regardless of that, if your annual revenue is less than, if your solicited donations are less than $7,500, then you can also get the exemption regardless of whether you've paid a professional fundraiser or not. So, you may qualify for the exemption. Check it out. All it really exempts you from is not paying the $50 to file. But if you don't qualify for that exemption, you've got to file this charitable registration. You've got to give the Secretary of State's office an updated list of your board members and officers. You've got to include financial reports. And you can upload the Form 990 and Form 990EZ as your financial report, and they'll accept it with no further fuss. But they don't accept that Form 990N. And so if you're in that weird spot between 25K and 50K where you don't file the big Form 990 or the EZ, but you don't qualify for the exemption, you've got to file a different kind of financial report. And the Secretary of State's office has a special form just for you to put your financial information into and to submit. And so I have to warn you, if you are soliciting charitable funding without registering, or if you forget to file the required forms and reports, you will begin to receive letters from the Secretary of State's office. I don't know if they're automatically generated. I hope for their sake that they are, but those letters will go out and they will get nastier and nastier about all the horrible things that they're going to do if you don't file this form. Don't ignore them. Just file the form. In fact, they will be happy not to take you to court to make you pay a $10,000 fine if you would just file the form. They would rather have your 50 bucks in the paperwork than try to get $10,000 out of you that you don't have. That is not an official statement from the Secretary of State's office. I can't speak on their behalf. But knowing what I know, they really just want your paperwork. So don't ignore those letters. Get your registration current and keep it current. There was an embarrassing incident some years ago with a really great organization that was doing really great work and was participating in a giving day, like Midlands Gives. And they had a TV reporter come up to their office and with a camera and ask them why they were soliciting funds when their charitable registration was expired. And it was embarrassing because they were basically accused of, wrongdoing when all it really was some paperwork, right? And you don't want to be in that situation where you get publicly embarrassed on top of getting a letter from the Secretary of State's office. No, they got it sorted out. They got the filing done, and everything was fine. But it was a little embarrassing, and you don't want to be in that position, I promise you.